Hi, I think I'm live. I think it's early. I did not mean to join so early, but that's okay. If you are watching the replay, here, let me put this on, that will help. There we go. Oh, they're dirty. If you're watching the replay, you can obviously skip this part, and I'll try and put down in the description below in the timestamp when is the best time or place to jump in so that you can actually be a part of the live. I really did not mean to start it this early. Still kind of fiddling with the live. I'm so glad that I was able to get it to work on YouTube this time. I ran into a couple issues, but got those worked out. So yay, I think that means that this is where we are going to be moving our live book discussions. There we go. That's better. My glasses are crooked. I need to get them fixed. In fact, you know what? I think I'm just going to ditch the glasses this time. Still works, right? It's mirror. That's going to be hard. Got something on my sleeve. That's all right. That's going to be confusing for me because everything is like backwards in there, but that's all right. I'll get used to it. I did want to tell you, and I'll go ahead and tell you guys this while we're waiting for people to join. But for those of you who are my YouTube subscribers, which is probably some of you hopping on here, I am really sorry that I have been absent on YouTube. I've been kind of updating things over on Instagram, but I have run into some health issues, and excuse me, they affect my voice. So it was kind of actually scary there for a little while, but we figured out the problem. It was not cancer, which is what we were worried about. So that was really good. But due to the issues going on, my vocal cords have unfortunately been severely damaged. At this point, they're thinking that everything will that they will heal completely and it will be okay. But I'm on vocal rest until till the beginning of January. So one more month. So I'm just trying to not talk as much as I can, which is hard because I'm a homeschooling mom who reads to my kids. And I'm also involved in theater at our local school, as well as I help out with a STEM program as well. So all of those things require a lot of talking. So really anything outside of that, I'm trying to limit. I'm trying to limit my socialization, just all of the things that I can limit. I'm trying to limit. I'll usually take some time on the weekend, one day where I try not to talk at all if I can. But I can't really make YouTube videos right now. So that's why they're not up. It's because my voice I'm trying to preserve it as best I can so that it will heal. All my vocal cords will heal well and be good. Even when I'm at theater practice, I'm trying not to sing, which is so hard. Oh, it's so hard. We're doing Frozen this year, and it's so hard not to sing, especially since I'm working one-on-one with a lot of these kids and their vocals, so it's really hard. But yeah, that's where I've been, and I'm probably not going to be making any more videos until midway into January until I get the all clear from my doctor, and I'm hoping that that happens. It's possible that that will be extended, but we'll just have to see. So that's why I haven't been making YouTube videos. It's not because I don't have videos to make. It's not because I don't want to make videos. Oh, hello! It's my mom. My mom's here. Hello, Mom. But that's why the YouTube videos haven't been here. It's simply because I have to rest my voice. So I thought I would go ahead and share that with you while we are waiting for people to arrive. It is officially 6 o'clock now, so we'll wait just a couple more minutes and then jump in on our book discussion. I do have water with me, and I'm hoping that I can make it all the way through without my voice giving out. It's quite possible that this discussion won't be as long as I would like. If my voice goes, it goes, and I'm just done. So I'm going to do the best I can. If you can let me know, are the vocals, are you hearing me? Is the volume good? Is all of that working well? I want to make sure. Hello, we've got Kimberly joining us as well. It's good to have you. If you can hear me, just let me know in the chat that you can hear me. If you can't hear me, let me know as well so I can get that. Okay, good. We have volume. That's good. Yay. And again, we'll wait just a couple more minutes and hope that my voice will last. Oh, I shouldn't have done that. That was not smart. Oh, well. It's hard not to use your voice. So I hope that you guys are all having a good Monday. I know that Thanksgiving is coming up, and lots of people are taking this week off from school, whether you homeschool or whether you're traditional school. I know that this week we don't have practice for theater, which is nice, but we do have a bunch of meetings for STEM Club because we're getting ready to hit a milestone in their project. So we are doing some meetings with that. We might end up taking the whole week off. One of my kiddos is pretty sick, and I think some of the others are starting to come down with it. So yeah, but all right, I am going to go ahead and get started. So the way this works, because I don't have anyone with me, I wish I did. That would be such a better conversation. But I am chatting with you guys in the comments. So if you want to join in the conversation, jump in the comments. I am going to take a look and be watching those as I share. And I have, with this book, you can see lots of tabs, lots of ideas of things that we can discuss and talk about. But I especially want to hear what you guys have enjoyed, and we can all as a group discuss questions that you've had or anything like that. I know that when I did an original poll giving topics and themes that we could discuss for these book clubs, ADHD was a really big one. So I looked at a lot of resources and narrowed it down to 2. And this one was on the list as well as the other one, because I feel like a lot of ADHD books are about parenting or they're about ADHD children in a school setting. And since this is a professional homeschool book club, a lot of the stuff related to the school setting isn't as relevant because we don't teach in school traditional style classrooms. We teach in homes, but a lot of the parenting stuff doesn't address academic stuff. I felt like this book, as well as the other one that we were looking at, they're more about ADHD as a whole. And I felt like that would be pretty helpful in all of our roles, because it does address just more what is ADHD and how to function with it, how to, whether you have ADHD or whether you're working with ADHD. I felt like it addressed it in a more general manner that would be really applicable to homeschool. And this was by far and away the one that you guys picked, and I was so excited to read it. One of my kiddos has ADHD, and he has listened to the audiobook of this, and he loved it, and he's wanted me to read it forever. So he's so happy that I've read it now, and I even took notes of things for us to discuss together as we were reading, things that I think might be more helpful for him. So that was really exciting. And I guess before we kick off, I want to know from you guys, was there anything, like, if there was there any one particular thing while you were reading this book that just really stuck out to you and kind of left an impression on you? Was there like one like aha moment or a takeaway that you had? I feel like, let's see, is this the one I have? Trying to see if I can find what I had marked here. Yeah, I think one of the things that I really appreciated was the attitude in the book about just how ADHD is not an excuse, but it's also not something that someone who has ADHD can help. So I liked that Penn really kind of drove that idea home. Yes, the overall positive attitude about ADHD. I really liked that as well. I feel like that is shifting in our culture, and I feel like people like the Holdernesses are a huge part of that cultural shift. I think a lot of times when I've talked to parents or worked with people, it's almost like getting a diagnosis is like this scary thing that all of a sudden you think there's something wrong with my child, and people don't want that. But I think that having an ADHD diagnosis, just like with many things, it gives you a toolbox. It's like I guess I like to think of it as if you're going on a trip, if you're going on a vacation and you have like a bunch of different suitcases, if you know where you're going, you're going to be able to pick the right suitcase that has the correct clothes. If you're going to Alaska, you would not want to take with you the suitcase that you would take if you're going to the Caribbean. They're two completely different climates. And so I feel like getting a diagnosis or having something along those lines helps parents and helps kids, helps the people who are going on the trip to kind of know what to expect and to know what the correct tools are to bring with them. And I feel like the positive attitude that was painted with it, that this isn't something terrible. This is something that doesn't necessarily fit the world that we live in, but this is something that, that we can all work with. I don't know. I just thought it was really good. And I really appreciated hearing his wife, Kim's positive perspective on it. Sometimes I get a little when I'm around someone who is like really over the top ADHD. Sometimes personally, I get very overwhelmed because I struggle with a lot of input and a lot of like I'm a slow mover. I don't like to go fast from thing to thing, so it can be overwhelming for me. But I think just listening to her perspective really kind of helped me to be able to kind of rewire the way that I think about things a little bit. And so I felt like that was really helpful for me. I don't know if that makes sense. Yes, it covers parenting and adult ADHD. I know that a lot of times parents who are homeschooling ADHD kids might themselves be ADHD. That's not always the case, but I think it's more common than we realize. And so, like listening to it from I liked having Penn's perspective of his childhood some now that he's an adult and he still has ADHD, and seeing the things that are still a struggle for him, but also seeing the things that are easier for him now that he's an adult. And I just thought that progression was really, really helpful. I'm just going to go through and share some things that really stuck out to me. I've got a bunch of tabs here and a bunch of highlights in my book, and I thought I would talk about them and get you guys input on them as well in the comments. And if you have something else that's not anything I'm talking about at all, definitely feel free to pop in the conversation. Yeah, I think we were looking at all of this list. I was looking at this with my kids and with my husband, and we were looking at the list of all of the things that could be there to diagnose ADHD. And of course, he makes clear that he's not a doctor and this is not an official diagnosis test or anything like that. But it was really interesting looking over and seeing. I have two kids who definitely fit this mold, and seeing how much they fit in with that versus I have a few things that overlap with this, but I'm definitely, I wouldn't say in the ADHD camp, but I can definitely resonate with a few of these things. And so it was just really interesting to kind of read that. And I wonder if any of you read it and were like, wait, my ADHD as well? I sure check a lot of these boxes, because I think sometimes, especially in women, we don't always pick that up. So that was on page, oh goodness, I should tell page numbers. That starts on page 16 and goes all the way to page 19. And it talks about there's different checkboxes about inattention, different checkboxes about hyperactivity, and impulse control. Those are kind of the three main things. So anyway, I thought that was really helpful. I also found this interesting, that the ADHD brain is not terrible at paying attention. It's terrible at choosing what to pay attention to. This is on page 38. And this is where Penn starts using it's backwards, the goldfish analogy, which I thought was really fun on the way through. So he just really talked about how it's not that ADHD people have a hard time paying attention. They can actually pay attention very well. It's just when there's so many things going on, often the things that they're choosing to pay attention to might not be the right things, or sometimes there's so much going on, they have a hard time picking which one of those to pay attention to. So I thought that was really, this whole idea of it being an attention deficit isn't so much the case. They have plenty of attention. It's just, where do I put that attention? I also thought that one thing that really stuck out to me a lot was his conversation on boredom. So on page 41, we have this idea that he's got it bolded here. It says, "We hate boredom, hate it, can't stand it, can't tolerate it. The feeling of boredom is physically uncomfortable," which was super interesting to me. Personally, I can't remember the last time I was bored. I don't really get bored very easily at all. So, you have this idea. We're always told that boredom is good for kids. And I'll even tell my kids, my child who actually is not ADHD will tell to me sometimes, he'll say, Mom, I'm so bored. I'm so bored. And he's the one that comes to me with that. so much of the time, and he just hates being bored. And my response is always, boredom is good. That's where creativity comes. Boredom is good for you. And I even remember, with one of my kiddos now, it's true. I would tell him that too. My one with ADHD who likes this book. And I would try, honestly, to not let him get bored, because if I recall, most of the times that some major catastrophe has happened was when he was bored. So even when he was little, I would try to keep him occupied, because I knew if he got bored, then he would be curious. And some of the things that he was curious about and tried to test, he wouldn't necessarily think through. Yes, the chart on page 40 is really good. So I'll show you that. It's reasons you may be distracted. So it's right. There we go. See, there, it's straight on the screen now. So this one is for ADHD, it's hard to concentrate because of a brain difference. And then for acquired attention disorder, so this is like maybe the normal person who just gets easily distracted, it's hard to concentrate because of TikTok, because it's so alluring. And then he's got poison ivy. It's hard to concentrate because you're itchy. So that's kind of the difference there. ADHD is a superpower. Acquired attention disorder is super common, and poison ivy is super annoying. ADHD is genetic. Acquired attention disorder is environmental, and poison ivy comes from dirt, he says, which I think is really funny. For ADHD is something you have for your life. Acquired attention disorder can be eliminated through behavior. So if you're just distracted by TikTok, or you're just distracted by your phone, you can put your phone away and then you have no problem concentrating. Or maybe you have to take all those apps off your phone and then you're good to go. That's not how ADHD works. So it's just going to be something else to be distracted by. Poison ivy can heal in a couple of weeks if you stop scratching. ADHD is an unrad name, he says, and acquired attention disorder is a meh name, and poison ivy is a totally rad name. So that was his last part of the of the chart. On page 61, he starts talking about how to find safe places or happy places for the ADHD brain. And he talked a little bit about school. And of course, a lot of us as homeschoolers know that traditional schools are not necessarily the best environment for the ADHD brain. And he addresses some of that. And I thought it was interesting, because I thought these are things that we could definitely put in place in our homeschool environment. One of the things that he said is that ADHD people actually like to learn. Most of us can dial in for a brief period at the beginning of a class. When you mix stuff up, there's a better shot at our tuning back in again. So basically, he's talking about shorter classes and more breaks. And so this is something that we can do in our homeschool. And of course, it's going to vary, because if you're doing a subject that your child really likes and is really into, chances are their ability to sustain interest in that is going to be longer. But one of the things he's saying is, for example, if you do a read aloud, maybe do a little bit of read aloud, maybe then do a little bit of an activity, then a different activity, and kind of change things up, rather than doing an hour of read aloud and then a chunk of a bunch of other activities. So if you break things up and move them along, that for most ADHD brains, that's going to be a lot more helpful. So if you're noticing that your student's having a hard time, you can try breaks. One thing that we'll do in algebra is we use a Pomodoro timer, because that helps my son so much. Algebra is very, very difficult for his ADHD brain. So with a Pomodoro timer, you can get them online, just it'll play for you. I think you focus for 20 minutes and then you have a 5-minute break, and then you focus for 20 minutes and have a 5-minute break. And that seems to really help, even just to break it up in those smaller chunks seems to help a lot. I know that Penn has a perfect ADHD schedule for him, which I think that this would probably vary a bit from child to child. But his idea is that you do math for 20 minutes and you take a break. Then you do English for 20 minutes and then you take a break. And science for 20 minutes, take a break. History, 20 minutes, break. Art, 20 minutes, break. PE, 20 minutes, lunch, and it goes on again. And then at the end of the day, second half of the day, you cycle back through and do 20 minutes of math again, and 20 minutes of English again, and 20 minutes of science again, and 20 minutes of history again. So as a teacher, for me, and just my brain, which again, I'm not ADHD, but that would be hard for me to like learn the math concept in the morning and then do the homework and then do the practice problems and stuff. Like I have to do everything all together or else my brain just kind of goes crazy. But I think for some students, it might work better to break it up that way. But it's just an interesting conversation that you can have with your ADHD child. And with homeschooling, the great thing is that we do have that flexibility to kind of spin it around however we need to fit the needs of our particular student. I also thought that, let's see. Well, okay. Yes. So there was also a true story that certainly relates to homeschool. And this is kind of right here. You see this on page 125. And I have seen this numerous times. A lot of times students with ADHD struggle to show their work in math, and they can often get the right answer, but they come at it in a totally like a roundabout sort of way, not the way the teacher's doing it. And this is fine until you reach a point. And a lot of times where that point is going to be different for each child, but you get to the point, especially when you get into high school maths, where if you're not showing your work, first of all, you might not truly understand what's happening. And then as you keep moving up, it gets harder and harder and you're more and more behind because you never really got this key concept that you would have gotten by showing your work. So this can be tricky. And a lot of times, yeah, he says here, I'm just going to read what he says. And this is so true. I've seen it so much. Side note, I bet some of you struggled with showing your work in math class. Anyone? Me too. I found different ways to arrive at problems in my head. I think this is one instance where we need to at least try to show the teacher how we got the answer, even if it wasn't by following the conventional route. They ask you to show your work for a reason. Sometimes the next level of math will be a lot more complicated than you think, and your homemade version of solving the problem could potentially blow up in your face. And this happens a lot. And then math suddenly becomes really, really hard. So I think it's important to actually understand that when you're teaching math to an ADHD student, learning how to show your work might actually be a skill that you need to take time to work on, like giving them the space and the grace to actually develop that specific skill of showing their work during their math. So that is certainly something that I think is super important. And as homeschoolers, we can do. And having grace, like maybe give them, like maybe instead of giving them 20 problems or 15 problems, you give them 10 problems, but they need to show their work so that they know that if they show their work, they can do less problems. And you know that it's better for them to show their work and do fewer problems than to do a bunch of problems and not really grasp the concept they're supposed to get. So in that way, you can say, hey, you can do this many problems, or you can show your work and do this many. That can and let that number decrease. That can be a way to kind of feed that reward center that Penn talks about a lot. I think another good example of this is kind of helping them. I think as long as you need to, and especially when they're doing new problems, do the work with them. So sit down with a whiteboard and work problems with them until they feel confident enough to do that work and do all of that on their own. Another thing that I saw that really stuck out to me, I think I'm just going to do a few more, probably go a little longer. On page 126, he talks about the alien fruit. I don't know if you guys read about this, but he was talking about how they gave a bunch of students this assignment, or people, I guess, I don't know if they were students, did it say? It doesn't. Oh yeah, students. Yep. And asked them to come up with a fruit from another island. And basically all the students with ADHD are from another planet, like an alien planet. The ADHD students came up with these hyper creative, super out there ideas. And most of the non-ADHD students just came up with variations of the fruit that we have on our own planet. And so the amount of creativity there is just incredible. And this is why ADHD brains are so important, because they are outside of the box. They are super creative, and we need that to continue to move forward in our society and in our world. And so I thought that the way that he explained this was really interesting. He said that they were better at setting aside information that other people would probably deem important, that fruit is usually round, for example, and design something much more interesting. So this is something that I see. One of the things that my husband's always said, he has done a lot of work as people services provider. So like working basically HR, kind of working with people in a job and making sure that they're happy with their job and their job gets done in all the different parts. And he says all the time, he tells me that every strength that someone has an opposite weakness, and every weakness has an opposite strength. And I think that that's something that we see here in this idea of the fruit. So this idea that he says that they can ignore information that other people would probably deem important and come up with these creative ideas. And I think this is a piece too that can be difficult when you're working with an ADHD child, for example, because a lot of times they'll ignore some of the information that you give them, maybe the directions of how to do a project, or maybe the pieces that seem really important. You might give them an assignment. You might even write it down, have it written so they can see it, and they come back to you with an assignment that doesn't match at all, because they might have picked out a few pieces and just have run with it in a completely different way. So if there are things that are particularly important, it might help to highlight those words in the directions if they have to do it that way. But I think one thing that can be really helpful is you as an educator saying, okay, what is the point of this whole assignment? And do they really need to follow the directions exactly as they are? Or how much freedom can I give them? And I think that that's something that's really important. That's something we try to do when we create curriculum for Ticket to Learning, is we say, okay, what are the really important parameters and where can we give kids the freedom to kind of run loose and go with it on their own? And I think that giving kids with ADHD as much freedom as you can, but being very clear where they don't have freedom, can be really helpful. Yeah, I think another thing that he talks about a lot, and like I said, I see that there are some new people joining. If you guys have anything you want to add to the conversation, whether you've read the book or not, we're discussing currently ADHD is Awesome by Penn and Kim Holderness. And we're discussing this especially as it relates to homeschooling, whether you are a parent who homeschools and has ADHD, or if you are homeschooling a child with ADHD. That is kind of the focus of this discussion. So ideally, I would have somebody sitting right beside me that I was talking to, discussing this book with. I don't have that today. So feel free to just jump into the chat. I have lots of stuff that I can share, but I especially want to hear what you have to think and what you have picked up from reading this book. One thing that Penn talks about on page 159 is that you can improve your symptoms with ADHD, but it takes time, and there's a lot of starts and fits and starts. Is that how you say it? I believe so. So basically, it takes time. And I think it's challenging because, especially if you have an ADHD brain, they want quick results. Sometimes as parents, we want to see results quickly. But regardless of the change that you're making, you have to give it time. Sometimes I feel like, you need to give it not days, certainly weeks. And sometimes, depending on the change, you need to give it months before you really start seeing any progress. And I think that can feel frustrating and overwhelming, especially when you feel like there's so much to fix and I can only focus on one thing at a time. But it's really in giving it that time. And I think you sitting down with your ADHD person in your life and saying, okay, what are the goals that we have? And we're going to commit to doing this for a month or 2 weeks or however long you say. I was talking to an ADHD parent the other day, and when her child was making a difficult transition in school, basically the rule was that they needed to be on their ADHD medication for a quarter of the school year. That way, they had the medication on board to help handling a lot of the new systems, a lot of the new overwhelm that the child was not used to. So the agreement was that they would stay on the meds for a quarter. At the end of the quarter, the child could decide if they wanted to keep on the meds or not. And if they stayed off the meds, there was a grade level that they had to maintain in order to stay off the meds. And that was something that they agreed upon together. So whether you're doing medication or not, it's as you're making these changes, okay, how long are we going to try this for? And what happens at the end of this time? Maybe at the end of the time, if things are able to get under control, there's some kind of party or reward or something along those lines. And if not, you just step back and reassess. And there's a lot of that's going to be happening with ADHD. The power of reward is strong. You have to have for an ADHDer, you have to have the correct awards, though. The correct rewards. For some kids, little stickers on charts, pom-poms in a jar. And when the jar is filled, you get something. There has to be an immediate reward, though. It can't be a reward like, oh, if you do this for a month, you get XYZ. As kids get older, you can space things out a little bit more and make those rewards not be quite so frequent. And it doesn't have to be something physical. Like Penn talks about how, sorry guys, my voice is going. I think I'm going to have to try and come up with the final thoughts here soon and wrap up. But Penn said that for him, even just checking things off a list can be really motivating. I know for some kids, just putting a smiley face or a sticker on their page when they finish, that can be super rewarding. One of my kids really likes me to grade all of his work. Even if I make him redo it until he gets a really good grade, he is motivated by that grade. And so some of those things can be, you find what works, but having those little rewards and having them frequently can really, really help. See, I have this one start, so I'm gonna, oh, okay. I see what it is. So this was one of the notes from Kim that I found particularly helpful. It starts on page 181 here. I'm going to read some of this to you. This, as a retired ADHD special ed teacher, mother of ADHD child, and a person with ADHD, this book is the most comprehensive with really good guidance. You know, I felt the same way, and I appreciated that he took the time to talk to a number of experts in the field. It looks like he went to a lot of webinars with some of these experts, that he interviewed them, he read a bunch of books, and really made sure to educate himself. So it's really interesting hearing this from the perspective of someone who has ADHD. And the whole time I was reading this, I kept thinking over and over, oh my goodness, he wrote this book. Like, this is a huge project. Writing a book like this takes a really long time, a lot of focus. And I can see how it would be really distracting, like really easy for someone with ADHD to kind of just lose interest in the project and not finish. But the fact that it's done, and clearly it was done with a lot of intention and a lot of research, just really kept, blowing my mind. And I was just thinking, wow, this is so amazing. But I wanted to read this note from Kim. And I think this might actually be where I wrap up, even though I found so much of the rest of it, like, really important. Oh, well, actually, one other thing. So I'm going to read this, and then I'm going to wrap up with one more thought at the end, I guess, because I found that thought. So it says, if you live with someone with ADHD, you might look at your ADHD or struggling with the task that feels automatic to you and feel disheartened, thinking, really? Shouldn't they be able to do this on their own? But sometimes, through no fault of their own, the load is really too much for them to carry by themselves. They need you for support. You're like a human tomato steak. With your help, they will grow strong. The goal is for your ADHDer to be able to get through the day without assistance from you, but they may need you to get them started. And I feel like that is so much of the case. I think the goal as we homeschool, especially as we homeschool, I think homeschooling parents really struggle a lot more with worrying about, is our child going to be ready to succeed in life? Because homeschooling is still, even though it's becoming more popular, it is still an alternative route. And we don't want to let our kids down. We don't want them to end up feeling like we failed them with their education. And especially when you have someone who learns differently, like someone with ADHD, it's easier to be concerned, like, oh no, are they going to be ready for life? But I think a couple things to keep in mind. One of the things that Penn brought out in his book, and I think is important, that I feel is an advantage of homeschooling, is that it's common for students with ADHD to be a few years behind their peers in development, in maturity, in being able to make decisions. So, if it takes them a little longer to get through school, or a little longer before they go to college, or a little longer before they're on their own, I think that's fine. And we need to give them the space. We need to give them the supportive environment that they need so that they can take that time to be developmentally where they need to be, so that when they do launch out on their own, they're ready to go. And I think by creating that space and not rushing them through it, that can actually be really beneficial to them. And I think as well, helping them to sometimes see that they're ready for something that they're not sure they are, that they can handle it, that they can do it, and being their big cheerleaders and showing them how they can. And I think that kind of brings me to the very last thing, unless somebody else has something, which definitely jump in here. The very last thing that I kind of wanted to bring up, which is so important with ADHD, is this idea of connecting and not correcting. Because a lot of times, kids with ADHD know they struggle. They might know that they messed up. And so continuing to hound them on it isn't helpful. And I think it can lead a lot to kids internalizing and making ADHD a negative thing, and that is their identity, rather than ADHD being a part of who they are, and that there are some struggles with it, but there's also some strengths. And some of the biggest ways that you can do for that is to connect with your kids with ADHD. And to connect with them doesn't always have to be hours all the time, but just like a high five when they do well, making eye contact and smiling with them, telling them that you're proud of them. All of these things are super duper important because they're completely opposite of what the world might do. And I like to, as much as I can, for my ADHDers to say, especially my oldest, is to say like, hey, that's super cool. Your ADHD brain helped you do that. Like if he has this totally off the wall idea, that's super cool. I want him to know that, hey, this ADHD brain, like, look what this has done for you. That's so cool. It is awesome too. It's not just a burden. And I think that those points of connections can really be helpful and good for our kids. So, with that, my voice is totally over this, unfortunately. So I meant to look at this before, but I didn't. So I'm going to look at it now and remind you what we're going to be looking at next for the book club. Pulling it up right now. So our next book club is going to be in January, and I'll be posting that date here soon. And we are going to be doing, that's what I thought. First, You Write a Sentence by Joe Moran, and it is going to be talking about writing. And I'm excited to read that one because writing and language arts I would say language arts and history are kind of my two favorite things. I also really like science. I don't know. I just like learning. But language arts is definitely where I spend the bulk of my time taking classes and doing research. So it's going to be really fun to see what is going on there and to read this book that will be new to me as well. And I am thinking that it might be nice for me to get someone to chat with. So if you have any ideas, definitely let me know. I don't know if I should look for a co-host, someone to join me regularly, or if I should be, I think it'd be cool if I could pull authors and things like that on, or experts in the field. People who, for in this case, might know a lot about writing, especially if I can pull people in the homeschool world. I would love to know, what would you guys like to see? Who would you like to see me chatting with, to make the conversation a little bit more interesting, so it's not just me chatting. But yeah, just let me know. And I'm going to be sending this out in an email probably tomorrow, and I will also be posting it on the blog post for this whole series. And thank you guys for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the book, and I enjoyed chatting with you. And again, I will join you in January, and we're going to talk about writing. Have a good day. Bye.